Everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ace Adobe. If you watched last month's program, you'll notice this image where in that program we learned how to remove this trash can from it using the clone stamp tool. So today we're going to be taking another edit on the image, and this time learning how you can adjust brightness, colors, exposure, everything inside Adobe Photoshop with their native camera editor without having to go to a program like Lightroom to do so. So to get started, you always want to make sure that your layer is selected, which it is. And then we go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and that pulls up the Camera Raw editing panel. So it's editing a photo, which I know a lot of us know how to do, but what I want to do is just go through a few of these tools and explain what they mean and what they do. So one of the most basic edits that you're always going to do with your photo is exposure. That's how bright your image is. And honestly, at editing, really, you just have to develop your eye for it and figure out what an image needs to be ideal in exposure and color and temperature. I usually like to go for a more natural edit, so I'm just going to edit it just enough where it looks natural, but also a little bit better than natural as well. So I'm going to increase the exposure to about 0.8. Contrast is the difference between your lights and your darks. So we see if we slide it over here, there's not much contrast. Slide it all the way over here, there's a ton of contrast. So I'm just going to increase the contrast ever so slightly, like that. So we see a nice difference between the book titles and then the shelves behind it. Highlights is another edit on the exposure side of your image. So if you have really white and bright areas of your image, increasing the highlights is going to make those more prevalent. Decreasing the highlights is going to make them less prevalent. Another easy way to explain highlights is if you take a photo outside on a sunny day and you can't see the clouds in the image, sometimes by bringing down the highlights, you can actually see those cloud shapes and make it not as overexposed. So I'm going to put the highlights right about here. Shadows is how light or dark the shadows in your image are. So these are the dark parts of your image. And just as we see, one extreme or the other really impacts the shadows of your image. And then I'm just going to bring that up as well, just ever so slightly, like that. Whites is how bright the whites are in your image. I think the whites here look pretty fine, so I'm just going to leave them as they are. Blacks is how prevalent, how deep the blacks are in your image. Once again, I think the blacks are mostly fine, so maybe I'll just bring them up a bit. Clarity is how clear your image is, how sharp those details are. So moving it all the way over here looks really odd. Over here also looks very odd, so we're just going to mess with the clarity ever so slightly like that. And then I'm not going to touch texture or dehaze. And then finally, one of the two other common edits you'll see in this panel are vibrance and saturation. Saturation is how saturated your colors are, so all the way from black and white to crazy, crazy. And then vibrance is how bright those colors are, or how rich. And then up here at the top, one I did forget to mention was your temperature, so you can make your image warmer or cooler with the temperature tool. I'm going to make it just ever slightly more cool like that. And then tint, you can add a green or a pink hue to your image, which sometimes you need if the image has been shot in like a funky way. Our next section here is curve, which you can use to mess with the lights, darks, and shadows of your image. So we see the shadows are here, darks is this whole area, lights is this upper area, and then highlights is up here at the very top. And then down here at the bottom, detail, we have sharpening, noise reduction. Noise reduction meaning if your image is very pixelated. So if we zoom in here, we can kind of see the pixels on the image. So if we did the noise reduction tool, that would eliminate those pixels. But the drawback here is the more noise reduction you have, the less sharp your image will be. So you don't want to have it too much because then it'll almost look blurry or out of focus. Color Mixer, this is actually a really cool tool of the Camera Raw. This allows you to adjust the individual colors of your image. So for instance, if I changed the oranges, that would only make the oranges in my image a different color or shade. So if I wanted them, for instance, to be more red or, be more yellow-orange, then I can do that. And sometimes this is good because if you've shot something and the lighting condition for whatever reason has warped the colors to look not good, then this is an awesome way to fix that. And it works with hue, saturation, and luminance. So hue is actually the actual color. Saturation, once again, how saturated it is, and luminance is how bright it is. So for instance, if we took all the saturation out of the reds, you see that they go away from the image. And the thing to note about this is, especially when you're editing with skin tones, you want to edit so that the skin tones look natural first before making a color look the specific way you want it to. Especially with the red, oranges, and yellows, because a lot of times those will impact the skin tones of people in your image. So just be mindful of that whenever you're editing your image. Color grading, another way to edit the shades of the midtones, shadows, and highlights. I don't color grade all too often, but that's another tool you can use. Vignette. This is how if you've ever seen images that have the cool effect of being dark on the edges, this is how they do that. It's called a vignette. So you'll see just a little bit of drama when you add a vignette. And if you go this way, that adds brightness to the edge, which is a less popular effect. And I think for a good reason. I believe the darker vignette just looks better than the random white on the edges. But, it all depends on the type of image you're going for. That's essentially how you would use the Camera Raw tool for the basic correction. There's also a few other things along here that you can use to heal your image or brush on it. So a radial filter, remember how I said if you edit the colors in an image, it'll affect all colors of that image? Well, let's say that I am shooting a person and I want to edit their skin tone without editing the oranges and reds of my image. So what you can do is apply a filter, so a radial filter or a graduated filter. You just click and drag, radial meaning this is circle, and we're just gonna, for the purposes of this, just focus on the printer and trash can again. And from here, anything that happens inside this circle, the edits will only affect what's in that circle. Or you can also invert it and have it be, this is what's unchanged, everything outside of here is what changes. Right now the edits are impacting the inside of it, which if we click invert, then it would impact the outside of it. And here you can feather it, meaning that the edits will be more or less harsh against the actual image. I like to feather, which you would slide it this way, because then it blends instead of just being like a harsh difference between the rest of the image. Keep it around, 50, 60. If you go, for instance, to exposure, you can bring up or down the exposure of that area. Hue, you can change the hue of what's ever in that image. And then the final thing here I wanted to show you is the presets tab. So this allows you to apply presets to your image without having to do any edits. You can also create your own presets. So let's say that you have edited the image, you absolutely love how it looks, and that's how you want every other image you edit thereafter to look like. You can create a preset for that image and then just apply it to the new image. I will mention with presets that you shouldn't be too heavily reliant on them because one preset won't work for every kind of image because, inside versus outside is a totally different ball game for editing a photo. But presets do give you a starting point, and from there you can just tweak until the preset settings look good on that image. And once you're satisfied with your image, you click OK. And there we go. We see that it's been edited and all those changes are effect. And the last step, as always, is to just save your image. So exporting it as PNG, JPEG, whatever you want to do. And so thank you all for coming to another Ace Adobe program. I hope this was helpful to you. If there's a certain topic you want to learn in the next program, comment it below. But otherwise, we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.